Hi everyone, my name is Natalie Dawson. Welcome to Leader Talk. This show is proudly brought to you by Brainiact. Each week we are meeting with incredible leaders from around the world to discuss all things leadership and business insights. Each person coming on this talk show has given up their valuable time for one very clear purpose: to give back to small and medium business owners. Now today, Gus Arianto and I are fortunate to chat to our guest, Brad Kasell, Principal Technology Strategist at Domo APAC. With a career spanning roles at global giants like McKinsey, Deloitte Digital, PwC, Oracle, IBM, Microsoft, and Salesforce in both Australia and the US, Brad is a vanguard in driving digital strategy and executing global transformation programs across sectors including retail, healthcare, and utilities. And Brad is here today to teach us all about the importance of bringing simplicity back to data analytics to reduce costs, drive productivity, and increase business impact. Welcome to the show, Brad.
Great. Thank you, Natalie. It's really fantastic to be here, and I'm excited to have a chat with yourself and Gus this morning.
And Brad, thank you so much for donating your time for our audience all over the world. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Wonderful. We are excited to chat data. But before we do have to ask you your two fun questions like we do with all our guests. And your one is specific to you because we know you've got an impressive career in tech and data. But do you have a hidden talent or hobby that might surprise our listeners today?
I think so, Natalie. One of the things that I enjoy that usually surprises people is that I'm a short track ice speed skater. So
wow.
and especially in Australia, that's relatively unusual. So I played ice hockey for many years and have done a bit of inline racing and so forth. But a few years back, I got into ice speed skating and absolutely love it.
Wow.
That is incredible. That's the first person that I know that's into that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, it's the type of thing you might see every few years on the Olympics, and that's about it. But we have a strong speed skating community here in Melbourne, so I've got a great club and a great coach, so I love it.
Wow.
That's incredible. There you go, Gus. Melbourne. That's another hobby for you.
You know, I hate people like you, Brad, because my hobby eating noodles sounds like
it sounds all right to me too. Yeah.
It sounds like, oh my God. I need to be more impressive on my hobby. You just kill my day, Brad.
No.
And there is one more we've got to ask you.
Yep.
I'm interested to know this one. Handwritten notes or digital reminders?
Yeah, that's a fun question, Natalie, because I'm not really a big kind of to-do list kind of person, and but if I am trying to figure something out, I'm very much a visual thinker. So for me, I sounds kind of dumb maybe, but I often use things like mind maps or diagrams or kind of sketch out when I'm thinking about the aspects of a different idea. I use those types of tools to kind of help me figure out what I'm thinking about.
Perfect. Spoken like a true data specialist, isn't it? That tech data, data area. Now, Brad, I gave a really brief intro to you. You've had a very impressive career. Can you share with our audience before we go into our chat? Tell us about yourself and also your career, please.
Sure, and I'll try and be brief. Like you said, I've spent time in the US as well as in Australia, back and forth over the years. I am an American. My mother's Australian though, so I've got a strong connection in both countries. The way I look at it, especially in terms of this discussion, is there's two parts to my career. The first is what I would call working for companies that manage data. So, for example, all the traditional IT companies, Microsoft, Oracle, IBM, they're all in the business of managing data, which is great. And I've learned a lot around technology infrastructure and how to deploy things and all kinds of practical and product considerations. But then on the other side of that, I spent quite a bit of time in consulting, which was at places like you mentioned earlier, places like McKinsey or Deloitte and PwC. And those companies are kind of on the opposite end of it. There, it's all about consuming data. Oftentimes you come into a customer or a client, you need to get access to their data and figure out some kind of problem. You're working to resolve some type of problem, give them some kind of strategy, and you need their data. And then it's at that point where sometimes the gaps become apparent. So that's how I like to think about it, is either on the data management side and then on the data consumption side. And, next thing you know, 20 odd years go by and that's a career. Yeah.
Wow.
It's incredible. You've worked at some amazing places. And this is why we're really excited to ask you all these questions, because we know how important data is. But before we go into it all, Brad, let's take it back really, simplify for our audience, especially those that aren't used to business analytics or data itself. When we're talking about data, especially in a business sense, what are we actually talking about? Can we define it for the audience?
Yeah, I think one of the ways to think about it is that, a lot of companies, pretty much every company, and it just makes common sense, is that they want to become data driven. So everyone says, and what that means is you just want to be better informed. You want to make decisions with the best and the most amount of information that's available to you. And it's just that. It's just fine. You're at a decision point. You want to make sure that you've considered everything. So in that sense, people get concerned a lot of the times around the nuts and bolts of data, what's the format, where am I going to get the data from, and things like that. How recent is the data? But fundamentally, data is just information that helps you make a decision, is how we like to look at it.
That's really simply put. So stuff that helps data is basically things that help inform decision making.
Yeah, and it exactly, and it's a subtle distinction, because the other element of that, what I found, is that companies oftentimes have way too much data. Companies love to collect data. They collect data just in case. Maybe we'll need this data down the road, or even sometimes they have to collect the data because of regulations or different requirements from government and tax and all kinds of reasons. So the big one of the challenges, and we'll probably touch on it a little bit later, is that companies have way too much data, and a lot of the data they have is not to be unkind, it's kind of useless. So they get caught up in this, what looks like a huge problem or a big mess of data, and that can be intimidating.
And then from your experience, Brad, if a lot of them have so much data, and we are talking about simplifying the data, where do they even start then? Because if we've got, I guess people don't even know how much data they've got, which is probably a problem in itself. But if we're talking about simplifying it, where do we even start as business owners?
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because oftentimes, like we said, it's either intimidating or it's overwhelming, and it feels like, I've got tons and tons of data that we've collected over years and years, all kinds of different sources, and I know in their mind they're thinking, I know it's in a bit of a mess, and it's going to take a lot of effort and time to kind of clean up and make it useful. And I think that where I would suggest people start is, and this is going to sound like it's hard work, but it's really not, is what we call data literacy. It's just becoming familiar with data as a business tool. Some companies that have been around for quite a while, especially small companies, maybe they're created by their founder. It's a family business. They've been operating, instinctively for many years. Oftentimes they've had great success, and they're using data, but they're using it kind of, in stealth almost. They're using data without even realizing it. They might call it intuition or experience or gut feel, but they're actually using data. So part of it is just, the data literacy says understanding what data even means, and recognizing data where I'm using it already. So it kind of demystifies the data. If you can start to understand your data and what data is relevant for your business, that suddenly makes it a lot easier. Then you can look at the pile of data in the corner and you can say, I only need 10% of that. I don't need all of it because most of it is rubbish. And I can think, well, I know that my business relies on 1, 2, 3 really important pieces of information, and I can forget about the rest. So it's that idea of just understanding your business and understanding what data is relevant. If you can do that, you've won the battle already.
Yeah, Brett, can I ask you a question? Obviously, you are very experienced. You're dealing with many different companies. Your background, very complete. You work for a company that managing data. You work with a company that analyzing data. I'm on the other scale of the spectrum where I am a small business And when I heard about this topic, data, how come it just feels complex? It feels difficult, and it feels like I'm allergic to it. So can you just guide me or bring me in to this?
Yeah.
Because I know it's important. I like when you said that data, especially the right data, allows you to make informed decision making. So I want to make informed decision making.
Yeah.
But I have to be honest with you, this topic is not as exciting as topic that I want to hear in the morning. So how can I be friendly to this topic?
Yeah, it's a great question, Gus. And what I find is the industry, and I put myself in that bucket as well. To some degree, we've done a disservice to our customers because, oftentimes, the data is around us everywhere. It's increasing exponentially. Everyone wants to collect data. Every company that you deal with and speak to feels like they're obliged to collect as much information from you as possible. And so you get this kind of growth of data you just overwhelmed by this tidal wave of data. Everyone's doing it and the industry's doing it and everyone says it's really important. So it does, that's a very common situation where a small business owner might say, it's too much, it's too hard, it's too complicated, I don't understand it, I'm going to just put it in the too hard basket and I'm going to get on with running my business, which, I perfectly understand that. I think what needs to happen is for businesses to understand, like we were saying a moment ago, even if you're a family business or you're a small business owner or you've been in business for 20 years, think back on the really important decisions that you make during the day or over the course of a month or a year. And, when you think about it for just for a few minutes, you realize you're not just relying on gut instinct. You're not just relying on, just magic. You are actually factoring in information that you already have. You might factor in stuff like sales, but is that data? Well, yes, it is. Or you factor in things like customer information. Is that data? Well, yes, it is. So a lot of times people use data every day, but they don't think about it as data. They just think about it as this is normal. That's just normal information that I get and I deal with. So it can be a bit scary, but I think sometimes just recognizing yourself how much data that you actually do use and value every day, at least that gives you a start. I mean, to your point, there still is a very real challenge in dealing with the high volumes of data because, like I said, the industry is its own worst enemy. We're just generating data like crazy. And we've got to find a way around that. And that's what, in fact, at Domo, we're trying to do is, and this is, I think, the purpose of our whole chat today is around how do you simplify that? Because it's overwhelming and it's only getting worse.
And Brad, if I'm listening in now, and perhaps I am a family run a local cafe, and I'm listening in and I'm going, we don't use any fancy data tracking or anything, but I'm a cafe. And obviously there is a lot of competition with cafes. We know that. If I'm not collecting anything, perhaps I'm not even aware that I'm collecting, but perhaps I am. So this is why I want to get your insight into this. Where should my data be coming from? So I'm the owner, I'm listening to this and going, I don't have a fancy analytics dashboard, but I want to be up there. I want to be the best cafe in the local area. Where can I be looking at data from? Where should I be collecting?
Yeah, I think there's 2 or 3 areas, and a cafe is a great example. On one hand, you've got kind of operational things. And what I mean by that is, you're buying your coffee beans, you're buying your eggs, you've got products that you need, supplies that you need to buy every day. And the price of those goes up. And so you're like, oh, gee, that's pretty expensive. It's costing me a lot now. And I'm spending a lot more on avocados than I used to. So, that's data, and that's data that's really tangible. It's very practical. It's like, oh, I need to adjust my menu. I've got to make the cups of coffee smaller or something, or I've got to raise my prices. And that's a real pain point for a small business because every week they're placing orders. They've got customers coming in and they love that new item on the menu. So they're working through that. And that's what I consider kind of operational data. Most small business owners would have a good handle on that already. And for that, it's just about, optimizing it. Can I find a better supplier? Or what happens if I buy in bulk? Or what happens if I buy at a certain time of the week or the day? Or, are there options? Can I make that just a little bit better? Because I've got to squeeze that. They've been working they've had the cafe for 10 years. They're really good at that. And it's just a case of making it better and better over time. The other one that they probably don't think about in terms of data is there's a good chance they're on social media. There's a good chance maybe the cafe has an Instagram page. They're posting pictures of that avocado toast. They're posting pictures of their beautiful cafe where people come and sit by the water and look out over the bay or whatever. So I think, there's things like that, or they might have, a social feed where stuff's coming through from what used to be Twitter, or things like Instagram and Facebook and so forth. And that's word of mouth, but that's still data, and they still care about that. They, okay, people are complimenting us. They're giving us feedback. Somebody said they got poor service the other day, and we care about that, or getting bad reviews on Google. So that's data as well, that they probably no one would normally ever think about that as a data problem. But so it's a mix. I think what I would do is for them not to get too hung up on, is it data and am I making data-driven decisions? It's more a case of just understanding that data is all around you. It takes different forms, and just, kind of use what you need, but I wouldn't stress for people to say, I've got to go and find some more data, because there's plenty available.
Brad, it sounds more than interesting. It sounds convincing. Like if I'm a cafe owner, I can understand my costs, my supply chain in terms of how much I buy coffee in the last 6 months, how much I sell it, even to the extent how many people start liking my products, through the Instagram, is it up? It's all exciting, but it also sounds expensive. It sounds expensive for engaging with any company out there for me to have all that. Because, come on, you and I agree, even to buy Microsoft Excel is expensive. So how can I dream to have a digital platform that allows me to have all the informations through the data that I have today in my fingertips? Is this expensive stuff? Is this?
Gus, that's a very practical kind of real world consideration, right? Because even though somebody might be switched on and they think, this is great, I want to bring more data into my decision making. The reality is it takes time and money, and they have to balance that with everything else. If you're a cafe owner, you're very busy. Your days, you're not just sitting around doing nothing all day. You're running every day from probably 6 o'clock in the morning until, say, 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So the idea of, I'm going to put in a data platform and I'm going to manage all my data, it's a very real consideration. So I think, and it used to be quite hard. Back previously, in the last, 5 or 10 years ago, you had to try and buy all the technology. You had to kind of buy equipment. You had to find skills and expertise. You had to learn a lot of complex things that really weren't very easy to use. What I think has helped in recent years, and I don't want to take away from the fact that it still requires effort, but now you find that there's a lot of online tools, and again, Domo is a good example of this, where it's available online, it's up and running already. You don't have to kind of set it up or build it or do lots of complicated and time-consuming kind of work. But likewise, a lot of products these days, ourselves included, we're available on what we call a consumption basis. And what that means is you just pay for what you use. If you come on and you have a small amount of data and you look at it once a week, the costs are trivial, and it's all set up, and you can do that quite easily. Or if you suddenly grow, you've got 5 cafes now, and you're branching out into gyms and fitness centers. next thing you know, you want more, and you find now that the tools can just grow with you. You don't have to suddenly throw away your Excel spreadsheet, and next thing you know, you've got to commit to a big, huge platform. A lot of the tools are quite scalable, so you can start with just one user, one person who maybe does this as a part-time, just when they have a free minute to have a look at their social media tracking, and that can grow and grow with you over time. So I guess my answer to your question is that you can start small these days. It's very, the tools, some of them are free, some of them are very low cost, and you can start very small. It's just, there definitely is that mind shift though of understanding that data is not your enemy, and data is not as terrifying as you might have thought. Once you cross that threshold, the tools are available, and they're relatively cheap, and they're the type of thing you can spin up very quickly.
Brett, am I right to say, Natalie started the session saying that through data, we want to bring business process to become more simple. Then we talk about, how important is data, which I think I agree. And now, lucky enough, in 2024, there's company like Domo and others, obviously, that can bring a solution to small business where we can view data simply. And also, it can be cost effective depending on what we need. But what happened when you deal with people like me, when I start to like something and I start to make it even more complicated because I start putting every data possible? I have every screen showing everything. So I'm a cafe owner. I know how much my coffee, but then I start putting a dashboard about the movement of coffee price in the world, moving up and down, yet I'm just a local coffee in Melbourne. So from your experience, how can we balance this where, yes, okay, I'm moving to this path. I want to be more efficient. I want to make better informed decision making. I want to utilize data. But this is just like 1 hour after this podcast.
Yeah.
So how do I manage myself so 2 months from now, I'm not just thinking and doing about this and stop selling coffee? I mean,
that's a question that's very near and dear to my heart, Gus, because what we find, especially like I said, the tools are available. They're usually quite easy to use, and they're relatively low cost. So great, you can get started. And what we find at Domo and other places is that for some people, that's fantastic. They love it. They dive in the deep end, and next thing you know, I've got customers that have got thousands of dashboards, and they just go crazy, within their organization. And it's one of the challenges, and we'll get to a little bit later around kind of data democratization. If you make data available to everyone in the organization, and they can do things quickly and easily, they go crazy. They just, this is fantastic. They're analyzing the price of coffee on the global market. They're doing all kinds of things because they can. And so that's a challenge for a business, because what you have to do is kind of put into place a little bit of, what's the right word for it? Kind of, not control sounds bad, but some kind of discipline that says, we understand our business, and we know the thing that makes the difference the most is the number of cups of coffee we sell. Or we know that, 75% of customers order the avocado toast. So that's what makes the difference. Doesn't matter about the one person who comes in and orders some weird item on the menu. So I guess my answer to your question is, it's really important for everybody, small business owners or CEOs, to understand their business. What makes the difference to your business, and then find the data that you need to support that. It's really easy to go the other way around, where you say, I love this data. This is so much fun. I've got so much data, and more and more and more. And you can quite easily get kind of out of control. And that's not to say that there aren't some interesting things to be found out, but you got to balance, like you said, you got to balance that between actually running your business and taking on a second job as a data analyst. I think like I said, it's about knowing your business and prioritizing where you're going to have the biggest bang for buck.
Brad, I love listening to this, and I love my coffee. So it was really interesting. I recently came across a cafe. I like my morning coffee. About 2 o'clock, I need my next coffee. And I went in to buy it, and my regular coffee cost $3. And my comment to them, wow, I have a mocha. That's the cheapest mocha I've ever bought.
It is very.
Now, what they told me was 2 to 3 is their happy hour. Now, it's not often that I find coffee shops with a happy hour, and it was an interesting concept. Now, I didn't think much of it, except that I got a relatively cheap coffee, and it was a brilliant coffee. But listening to you now, to me, this sounds like this would have been a data-driven decision, that from 2 to 3, and it was actually half price. So they half the price of their coffees between 2 and 3. From your experience, would this have been, I mean, they wouldn't have just made up, hey, from 2 to 3, we're going to half the price of our coffees. It would have been data informed, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, there is a good chance that maybe the cafe owner picked up a marketing textbook and saw some ideas around promotions and stuff. But oftentimes one of the things that, again, is kind of a hot button for me in terms of data is around this idea of insights. And people say, I want to look at the data and I want to extract some insights. But for me, insights are not about, we sold 500 cups of coffee today, and tomorrow we sold 510. Then the next day we sold 490. For me, that's just reporting. But the insight is that, if we offer a promotion from 2 to 3 p.m., we can add another 50 cups of coffee to our day. Like that unexpected connection of learning something interesting about their customers. Gee, we get a lot of, or we got no one coming in between 2 and 3 p.m. But we've got staff on hand and we need to stay open. So I think the insight and the really value of data is finding those unexpected. It's great to look at data and say that's odd or that's weird. That's what you want to get from your data. You want to find things that you didn't know. If you already know it, it's just keeping track. That's accounting or reporting. But data and insights are when you don't know it.
Yeah, it's interesting to flip it that way. Now, you also, Brad, mentioned just in a previous answer, data democracy. Now, this is a new term. I've never heard of this. Gus, not sure if you've heard of this before. So can you explain to our audience what this is? Because I'm assuming it's a term that we're going to be hearing more of.
Yeah, absolutely. So data democracy is basically, it's the idea of making data available to everyone in the organization. So, back in the day, and especially at larger companies, managing the data or creating the reports and insights, that was the domain of the specialist team. You had to be a data science guru. You had to really be a computer science person to understand the data, to figure out how to manage it, how to manipulate it, and how to produce the reports and insights. It was really complicated and took a long time. So what tended to happen was the people who were allowed to do that was a very small set of people. And they would then take those reports and they would send them to the managers, once a week, once a month. And that was it. And that's slow. It tends to rely on just standardized reports. There's no creativity there. There's no kind of playing around and finding out those unexpected, those weird kind of correlations. So the notion of data democracy is, let's make all the data, within reason, because obviously there's things around finances or health information. There's confidential data, but by and large is, let's make as much data as possible available to people on the front line, or people, everybody. So, because good ideas come from everywhere in the business. So oftentimes you might be in the cafe and you'd be surprised the people that are waiting on the tables, or the person or the barista might have some fantastic ideas about how to improve productivity or the efficiency of the process. but they don't know. They've got no way to know. Are they selling 500 cups of coffee? Or are they selling 550? All they know is they're just too busy cranking the espresso machine. So, but if they had access to the data, and oftentimes that today with something like Domo or other tools, that could be on their phone, it could be through their social feeds, it could be all kinds of different ways for them to interact with the data. It doesn't have to be a 6-inch report that's dropped on their desk at the end of the week. So, data, just to get back to your question, data democracy is the idea of, if we make data available to everyone, that will stimulate innovation, creativity, and lots of new ideas and things that we didn't understand before. The challenge, though, which is really funny, is it requires people to give up a bit of control. It's a lot of times people who manage the data are quite protective of the data, and they worry that, like the example Gus had a minute ago, Gus is going to go off and create 1,000 different dashboards and reports because he loves data and he loves playing with data. And if his day job is being a barista, they probably want to balance that with people spending all their time just playing around with the data versus being able to kind of look at it creatively.
And Brad, in your experience, if you compare, and I'm not sure whether this is can be answered in the right way as well, because I'm not sure whether this is happen or not. But just say there's two companies equally. Natalie own a cafe, I own a cafe.
Yeah.
Natalie and I listening to this podcast, and next week we are dealing with Domo, and we start putting our effort to not only understand about our data, but also to have a better view on our business through data that we have, and then start releasing these tools to the employee as a data democracy. Between Natalie and I, in your experience, what's the sign of a good company that can be successful after we do all that? And what are the type of companies that after a while it's actually failing because of the data itself? Because I just feels that I don't want my, like what you mentioned before, I don't want my coffee makers to start thinking about a lot of other things than making the right coffees.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I also agree with you. What would happen if my number one coffee maker come up with an idea of making a better coffee because he or she understand that the last 3 months at certain time or certain, something going on through data. So
yeah, I think there's a couple of it's a great, that's the balance, right? You want to, at the end of the day, both you and Natalie are running cafes, and you need to stay in business, you need to be profitable, you need to keep the lights on. So I think that the answer to that question is, firstly, is try not to overwhelm people with data. So that the tendency with data democratization is, here's everything, and you open the cupboard doors to everyone in the company and say, here's all of the data, have at it. And that's really not very productive, because there's so much data there and so many different things, and people, the ones who are interested, will just dive into the rabbit hole and they'll never come out. They'll be sort of looking around and they'll be playing around with data forever. So I think you need to, kind of curate the data a little bit, or say, these are the things that we're working with. This is number of cups of coffee per day, the price of our supplies, different things, customer satisfaction, complaints, whatever it is. Pick, 4 or 5 or 10 things maybe that really make a difference to the cafe. And then you say, look, everybody, these are the 10 things these are the 10 most important pieces of data that we have. And, here it is, it's on your phone. You can have a look at it while you're on break, or you can just for your information, this is how we're tracking, this is how many cups of coffee we've sold over the last 6 months, and ask them for ideas. There doesn't have to be about them necessarily doing the data analysis. It can be more like just, hey, you guys may not realize, but this is how things are. This is the reality. That barista who's working hard every day, he probably has no idea he's serving up 500 cups of coffee. He probably, and if you said, what do you think it would take to make that 600? He's probably got some good ideas, but he's just never been empowered to think about it before. So sometimes it can just be about data sharing. Doesn't really have to be democracy.
Yeah. And I like this as well, because through that conversation, the barista probably will realize that he spent a lot of time talking to the customer.
Yeah.
And that's why they only make 300 coffees a day, not because of the machine, not because of anything else. It's just simply because of that. And the data actually show that. Yeah.
Yeah. Or, simple. You see this sometimes in cafes. I love the cafe analogy. It's a really good one, where sometimes there'll be two baristas. One is extracting the espresso, and the other one's heating the milk. And then those guys are flying. They're just pumping stuff out like there's no tomorrow. And so they might say, if we added a second person who was doing just the milk and I'll do the coffee, we could pump out 1,000 cups of coffee a day. And then you got to think to yourself, well, we don't have 1,000 customers. So, different problem. But what could we do then? Yes. Could we do a promotion? Could we do a happy hour? Could we do something to get, then if we've got capacity to produce 1,000 cups, now let's turn our attention to how we're going to sell 1,000 cups.
And this is what you call insights, not informations.
Yeah, so, exactly. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Yes. And I think this is what I get as well, right? So data is everywhere. What we're talking about on our podcast today is not using data for your information gathering, because that's already available. You don't need a new tools to understand how many coffee you sell. Yeah. You might need the information to know where to buy a better coffee with a better price if you want to increase your coffee market from 300 cups to 1,000.
Oh, absolutely. Or, if people how many people are buying coffee with a meal, or how many people are buying coffee with a croissant, like what can you do to upsell and cross sell and do kind of fun things? Because, fundamentally, you're running a business. It might be a family business and you might have a deep love for coffee. But, I think fundamentally, if you can look at it a different way, this is where data is not the be all and end all of everything, but it's like you said just then, Gus, it's all around us. And sometimes it's a very subtle thing. Just say, just actually awareness, let's forget about analysis. It's just data awareness. Oh, okay. I didn't realize that, like I said, the price of avocados had tripled in the last month. No wonder my wallet's getting lighter, but people love avocados, so they keep buying them. So, what do you do?
Yeah.
Brad, I want to touch on a real world success story. I've got it written down here where, you've mentioned previously a company you work with increased productivity by 72%, which is incredible. After simplifying their data approach. Now, I think every business owner out there, again, depending if they want more customers or how they're going, would love to know more about this. How did they even do this, or where did they even start? I mean, that is an incredible number.
Yeah. So, so that particular case study, Natalie, was Suntory. So Suntory is an alcoholic beverages company based in this particular instance. That was in the UK, but the lessons apply everywhere. And I think for me, the challenge a little bit, and this is how sometimes data can be a little bit misrepresented, is something like productivity is very hard to measure. It's hard to know. And so, for example, in this case, it was around the productivity of their sales teams. They were able to simplify the sales process so that salespeople could spend more time selling. So that was the measure of productivity. It was like, because of being able to simplify the process, the salespeople had more time in their day and were able to make more calls and have more. So that's where that number comes from. But for me, my feeling is that's a little bit almost like a vanity metric, where it's like, that's great because the people are working harder. And I get that. I understand that productivity is a really important business metric. But the thing that I like more about that particular case study is that their distribution increased by 33%. And so what that means is, like, salespeople might be making more calls, but are they actually closing more deals is what I care about. If you're the business owner, and suddenly the salespeople are running around super busy, great. That's a good indicator. But if you look at the other side of the equation and suddenly, we're selling 33% more product, now I'm interested. Now that makes a really big difference to my business. So for me, the only thing I would draw out from this case is kind of be careful what you measure, and think again, like we were talking about earlier with some of the previous examples, what data makes a difference to your business and what doesn't. You could argue activity, whether it's a salesperson or anybody, that's good to know, but sales or profitability or market share or those things actually matter. You might have the greatest salesperson in the world and sits around and does one deal a month, but if it's a $1 million deal, then hey, good on them. So I don't want to take away from it, because it's really interesting. You can make massive improvements. And I think that's the lesson. The potential for data is that it can make really material differences to your business. It's not just a slight improvement here or a 1% there. Especially if you're coming from, not using very much data, there can be a big impact right away. So, and that's something that I think is encouraging for most people. It's like, okay, that, people often struggle. What can I do? What can I do? One thing you can do is just have a look at the data that you have, and use your knowledge of the industry and the business that you're in. And next thing you know, there's always gaps. There's always opportunities within any business that relies on a process. So and you get numbers like 72%, which is phenomenal.
Yeah. So Brad, So I'm a cafe owner. Natalie and we are a cafe owner in this case. We like what we hear. We want to be more effective. We want to use data for our insights. We call Domo. We call, hey, Brad. We want to have a digital tools that allow us to do ABC. What do we need to give to company, for example, a company like Domo? Because my challenge right now, my cafe is not profitable right now. So I'm embarrassed to even come to you to say, hey, I want to, I already talked to my accountant showing my negative profit in the last 1 year. Now I have to contact you from Domo, for example, releasing how bad I'm running a business. As a business owner, but my ego is really on the ground right now, because every data is just a bad data. Like, how much information I need to give for me to be able to use service from company like you, for example?
No, and that's a very practical question, Gus, because you're right. Oftentimes when people are struggling and the idea of suddenly exposing their data and stuff is quite sensitive. And also, like you said, times if they're not performing really well, oftentimes money's quite tight and you don't have the luxury of just splashing around money and investing in some of these things. So one of the ways that we've approached that is, there's two ways. One is we do have a free version of the product. So you can log on, you can create an account. It's all online. So it's up and running already. You just log on. And you get a certain number of what we call credits. I think it's 300 credits a month, and that you can use that in a variety of ways, and that's free, and that's it. No questions asked. Off you go, and you can do that. And in terms of the data, one of the things that's really important to Domo, and honestly any company in the data space, is around privacy and security. So the fact that your data shows that you're maybe not performing as well as you would like, or you could show that you're performing incredibly, that's none of our business. And nobody from Domo would ever look at that data, and we have processes where we couldn't, even if we wanted to. So, I think on one hand, your business is your data and is your business, and that's completely protected. And then there is a way for you to start at zero cost, and you can try it out, and it's going to take some time. You've actually got to load up some of your data, and you've got to actually work through it. So it's not free, but it's certainly the tools and the technology is there for you to get started. Now, obviously as a software vendor, there's a limit on that. But the good news is if you get to that point where you've reaching the limit, it's actually working for you. You would never, if you find it's not working and it's useless, then you can move on. But if you suddenly if you get to the point where you call me up and say, hey, Brad, we've been using Domo for the last month and it's really useful and I want to do more. And you're entering into the area where you need to start having a paid subscription, then it means you're in a better place. So, so I think there's a way for companies to get started pretty quickly.
Thank you.
And Brad, I've got to ask, the future of data analytics, with your experience, I'm sure you've seen it evolve and come, across quite considerably. Where do you see, is there anything business owners need to be aware of, with the emerging trends of these data analytics? Like even understanding, this dashboard that, Domo have, I think it's incredible that you're able to pull data. Is there anything else that business owners need to be aware of that perhaps could be coming up in the near future?
Yeah, I think there's probably two things, Natalie. One is, certainly, data's not going away, and no one is ever going to say, gee, I'm going to make decisions based on no data. Like that the idea just makes common sense, and that's going to increase. I think the pressure on it probably applies more on larger companies, but there's scrutiny around decisions, and people need to be able to justify decisions. And you have investors, you have other stakeholders, and people want to know why these decisions were made. So I think there's some pressure in those areas. But the mainstream tools and a lot of the tools, say for example Domo and others, have become quite simple and relatively easy to get started with. So that's kind of where we are today. But the thing that you'll see in the press and everybody talks about these days is things like artificial intelligence. And that's, for me, I think it's a little bit, well, not a little bit, I think there's a certain amount of hype around that, and we're all gonna the machines are going to dominate humans, and we're all going to it's the end of the world kind of scenarios. But I think if I was a small business owner, I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think things like AI, and you might remember a couple of years back, there was voice technology. Everything was going to be voice recognition. Technology always has kind of something that's hot and hyped at the moment. I think, if I was a small business owner, I would just focus on the opposite of just doing things as simply as I could and saying, look, I don't need the fancy tools. When we talked the other day, I used the term a data palace. And I've been involved with larger companies over the years that have spent millions of dollars and years of development building out data palaces because they wanted perfect solutions. They wanted beautiful, elegant, scalable, perfect solutions. But the tools today are super flexible. They're low cost. You just pay for what you use. And a small business owner can get started tomorrow, and they don't have to wait for everything to be perfect. That's what I would think is just like, don't get caught up in the hype and just get started. And you'll find gaps in your business. You'll find opportunities really quickly. And, it might not transform your industry, but it's going to make a difference to your business. So, in that respect, I think it's worth it.
Love it. And so no need for data palaces. I love it. We want to keep it simple.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, guys.
And I think I also agree with that. I think we all are a victim of everything have to be perfect. When we have 1,000 dashboard, it looked nice when we turn it on in the morning.
Yeah.
I remember this is a real true story on my experience. Long time ago, probably about almost 25 years ago, I worked in the software business, and one of my colleagues used a digital tablets, like a calculator called IPAC, HP IPAC, if you remember.
Yeah.
And I look at him, and he used this tool so effectively for everything back then. Calendar. I don't think it's email back then, but he used it effectively. Then the new iPad came out, and I bought the new one. So he used the 3 years old one. It's looked like, oh my God, it's old. The new one came, and I bought the new one, and I bought every software available to the new one, right? And I didn't use it. I can't use it. I didn't use it. I end up not liking it because it's too complex, and he still used that.
Yeah.
So I think the parallel of this with all this is you can have everything, but the readiness of the business from the culture point of view to actually get used to looking at data for insights instead of just data for information, and then everyone just died because it's so much. I think that's what I learned as well today.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, we were talking earlier about the idea of providing data to your barista, or you could provide data to the field service technician out in the truck, or you could provide data to the delivery man. You look at an Amazon delivery man today, or anybody who shows up at your door to deliver something, they've got tons of data available to them, and there's all kind. But they wouldn't think of themselves as a data specialist or a data analyst. They're a delivery man, or they're a barista. So that idea of just having people getting used to the idea that data is not scary. It's no different than any other thing you do during the day. You just you'll have a look on your phone, you'll have a look on the computer, you'll use that information to make a good decision in the moment, and you just keep going. You won't think, this is hard, or it's easy, or it's anything. It's just a natural part of doing your job. So, but that cultural aspect is critical.
Yeah. Are you saying, it's funny, it's just come around my mind right now. Are you saying, so let's just look at, I wake up in the morning, I often check the weather forecast.
Yeah.
The weather forecast is come from an app, and the app just basically say at 12 p.m. or at 1 p.m. it will be rainy, it will be sunny, or whatever. But the data in the back, somewhere out there in the cloud, will have millions of data collecting from all over the world to measure every temperature. So what you're saying is the data of that thing, the big stuff, is available in any business. We understand cost, we're paying something, we have interest. What the business like Domo can do, it's simplifying all this and allow us to see the final data insight. Is that what you providing as well, Brad?
Absolutely, because like we said before, there's so much data, and it's overwhelming, and you want to get away from that. Like, some of it is simplifying it through dashboards or visualization, but even the other element is automating some of those things. Like, for example, you have a business that sells umbrellas, or that's a stupid example, but you have the cafe, and that on days when it's rainy or days when it's cold, you have 20% more customers. So great, you get up in the morning and it's going to be rainy today, but maybe that triggers an alert to your backup waitress, Sally, said, look, we're going to have a busy one today, are you available to come in? She gets a message on her phone saying, can you do the shift from 10 till 2? And she's like, yes. But that's something that the data tells us, because you've been operating for the last 10 years in this location, and that's what's going to happen. So little things like that can make a big difference.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
So interesting. Brad, you touched on data visualization. Couldn't even say the word. What do we mean when we talk about that?
Yeah. And again, another great question, Natalie. And for me, the really important thing about any insight, let's say, is clarity, is being able to represent, what does it mean? So one of the ways that people do that is, some people like looking at data in a table. They like looking at it in a spreadsheet. They love the numbers. Others like having some kind of a chart or a diagram that shows the numbers as well. For me, visualization, it could take any form. It could be on my phone. It could be on a web page. It could be printed out. It could be anywhere. But the really critical thing is clarity. Is so that when, if you're not a data expert, but you look at it and you understand what it means, because there's a real tendency for the complexity to creep in. Oh, let's plot the sales per month, and we'll overlay the profitability, and then we'll overlay the temperature on the day so we can see what the difference was, and then you overlay this and that, and you end up with really complicated slide charts and diagrams that people, the author, whoever created it, they love it. It's their baby. But in practice, you got to think about the audience, who's consuming this information. If I have a chart that's going to the founder of the company or the head of the company, the owner, what they care about is things like, profitability, or they care about, are we making sales today, or is there a problem? What's the exception? Did the staff not show up today? And they need to be able to see that at a glance. They don't care about all the fancy stuff, if you like. It's just like, what is this chart, or what is this piece of information being used for? And my personal, hot button is for it to be as simple as possible. Have charts and dashboards and diagrams that only show you one thing, and they show it crystal clear, so that when you look at it, you don't have to think about, oh, what's going on here. You just know, okay, sales are down, there's a problem, or that things are going great, and here's why. So visualize. Yeah. So
interesting.
Go ahead, Gus. Yeah.
Who can guide us whether we have too much or not too much? Is it Domo? So just for example, if we come to Domo, like you are a company who can build us or help us with data management or data information insight, whatever we want to call it. But do you have a service within your business that can guide us as well around this? Because how do I know I'm actually looking at more data than I need? And who should I talk? Is it another business call, something else that I need to engage? Because how do I
fantastic? That's an absolutely essential question, and there's no single answer. Like, one is, you need to have the discipline yourself to say, I've been doing this for a while now. Is it useful? Like, what do my staff think? What do I think? Is this clunky? Am I getting a return on this or not? Is it worth doing? And it could simply be, is there ways to improve it? So you kind of have a feedback loop internally and say, we've been using this for a while, but it would be really good if I had this one piece of information or this thing. So have a feedback process, but at the same time, that's kind of learning by trial and error. So there are certainly Domo. We have people who can help you, or there are partners within the industry where they can provide different types of services. And I think it's incumbent upon anyone, if they're going to use a tool, to just make sure that at least make an effort to get the most out of it. Otherwise, there's a potential to just waste your time and waste money and kind of fool around. And we see that from time to time, where people, well-intentioned, but they don't actually, take advantage of what tools can do, and then in the end they're disappointed. So.
Yeah.
And I also think everyone operates differently. I'll give you an example. So my husband, Jared, very data driven. So he'll create Excel spreadsheets, print them out, put them on my desk, and I'll take one look at it. Too hard. Like, it's too much. It doesn't even, I can't even process it. But then I convert it into a simple infographic, and I'll give that to him, and he'll go, what's that? And I'll go, that's a simplified version of your, so it's how everyone also processes. He needs the data. The infographic is not enough for him, but the infographic is all I need to do what I need to do in the business. So
that's exactly right. That's just a really important point, and it touches on that democratization piece, where everybody in the organization processes data differently, and they use it differently, and it's really not effective if in this case, if he's sending you spreadsheets every day, because that's not what you need to do your part of the process. So that's
just
that's
made me
exactly
think of
right.
that. I'm looking at the time. We've gone over time. Brad, we can keep talking about data, I think, all day, but over to you, Gus, to wrap up the show.
Thank you. And Brett, once again, thank you so much for your time, your insights. This is an important topic for our audience. Data, especially the right data, allows businesses to make informed decisions. Start with data literacy, understanding what data needs and how it's relevant to your business. Always think and remember, when you are facing important moment where you need to make decision, data, especially the right data, will help you to make better decision. Start small in this process. Data is not your enemy. Important for every business to understand your business. It's more than the data itself. You need to understand your business and understand the core foundation of your business, and then use data to support that. The ability to simplify data, utilize current and past and future data will advance your business. Successful business using data more than information. They use it for insights. Insights allows you to see the blind spot or the future opportunity. Brad, thank you so much for your time. Today is very important topic. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for making it so much fun for me.
Wonderful. It's been brilliant, Brad. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for tuning in. For more information on Leader Talk and for some great resources to help your business grow, check out brainiact.com.au. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.